Hello, book lovers. I recently read, oh my goodness, Endgame by Frank Brady. And the subtitle is Bobby Fischer's Remarkable Rise and Fall from America's Brightest Prodigy to the Edge of Madness. Uh, I have off and on in my lifetime played chess, not particularly well, but there was one night that my friend and we'd been playing in the afternoon. We were going to resume the next day, and I had overnight to decide my next move. And I really worked long and hard, and I made notes of where everything was on the board so I could move things around and get them back where they belonged, and figured out what I felt was a pretty much foolproof way to checkmate him in 5 moves, no matter what he did. And I mean, this took hours. And the next day he arrived, and I managed to achieve that. And it was a high point, I'll tell you, because I don't know, chess is complicated. But Bobby Fischer was, well, first of all, he had an IQ of 181. And also, he was kind of a latchkey kid. He grew up in Brooklyn, and his mother was so busy. She was a single mother, um, and Bobby had an older sister named Joan, and so Joan would be, at school later than Bobby, being somewhat older. And his mother would be, in nursing school and nursing, and so he was definitely coming home and having many hours to himself. And back in those days, I guess it was safer for a kid to do that. But the only thing he'd found that really captured his imagination was chess. And so he would spend hours and hours practicing and reading, and at an early age became a member of, the Brooklyn Chess Club, and then not long afterward, within a couple of years, became a member of the Manhattan Chess Club, and when he was 13 years old, became the youngest chess master in U.S. history. And then it was a very big deal some years later when he played Boris Spassky in Reykjavik, Iceland, and won. Um, he was Grandmaster of the world at that point. Uh, so in 2 years, he was supposed to defend his title, and essentially refused because he had some arguments with how the contest was being presented. He had arguments with the rules, and they tried to work with him, and eventually, by default, the other player won. And so over the years, he'd be presented with, and by the way, by this time he was living in California. He was 28, 29, I believe. And by that time he was being given offers where, there's a $5 million purse for this game. The winner will win $3.5 million. The loser will win $1.5 million. Who would turn that down except Bobby Fischer? So I think, for one thing, in his mind, he felt as long as he was never defeated, he was still grand champion of the world. And as time went by, he he moved around a lot. He lived for a time in Budapest, and he lived for a time in Japan, going back and forth every 3 months between Japan and the Philippines, living in the Philippines for 3 months, living in Japan for 3 months. That way his visa would never expire in either place, his tourist visa. And then finally he moved to Reykjavik. he was in trouble with the U.S. government over non-payment of taxes going back many years. And because of their sentimentality over him in Iceland, at sort of putting them on the map and making them really kind of a famous place, they were only country in the world willing to give him citizenship. So that's where he spent his final days and eventually died. The gentleman who wrote this book was a friend of his and is a friend of many friends of his, and so had access to a lot of opinions and facts that nobody ever has. And at one point he quotes a psychiatrist, pardon me, getting dry, as saying that he didn't believe that Bobby was paranoid schizophrenic. And I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'd say he certainly showed all the signs. He certainly was paranoid, and with all the moving around, he was afraid the government was spying on him. He'd often go out in disguises so one would notice him. He thought the KGB was going to assassinate him, and on and on. But anyway, he was a strange and a brilliant person, and for most of the book I liked him, except when suddenly this nice Jewish boy became anti-Semitic, and that's where he lost me, because I just, whether he was suffering from depression or paranoia or schizophrenia or a combination of all the above, that's one thing I personally I can't forgive. So as much as I might admire his talent, I came away from the book not liking Bobby Fischer very much at all. So you will find this book interesting if you are a chess player or interested in chess, or if you're a Bobby Fischer fan, or if you like reading books about famous people and or eccentric and or crazy people. It was a really good book, I have to say. I listened to it rather than read it, and it was hard for me to put the earplugs down. I mean, I finished this in 3 days. And yeah, and it was hard selecting what to read afterward, because it was going to be hard to find something as good to read. So I would highly recommend it if you have any interest in those things I mentioned. That's it for this one. Love y'all. Bye.